Hi, welcome to another Corporate Panzula episode. My name is Lunga Lukuzwa and I'm an accountant based in Sandton. In this video, I just want to share some of the tips that I wish I knew when I was still a student. Just one of those things where, as I was progressing through my second year, third year, and eventually CTA, I was like, oh, I wish I knew this all along because it would have made my life so much easier. I could have saved so much time. I could have been a lot more efficient and effective in the way that I study. I just could have been a better student overall. This is it. This is what I want to share with you. And regardless of when you're watching this, whether you are in your first year, going to your second year, or whether you're in your third year, not even third year, maybe you're going into CTA, congratulations, by the way, if that happens to be you. Whoever you are, I hope these tips will make your journey easier. Enjoy. Now, the first module that I want to talk about is financial accounting or financial reporting, and this was one of my favorite modules. And the way that I would recommend, the tip that I would share with myself as to how to go on about the studying of financial accounting is firstly soft launch, right? Figure out a way to introduce yourself to a topic. Now, this could happen whether you attend a lecture and they're busy teaching you, okay, in the standard, this is what we're going to learn about, this is what's going to happen, this is the objective. Just have some sort of like a soft launch, right? The way that I used to do it personally, I would open up my standard. Number one, soft launch, open up my standard, and I'm just gonna skim through it. I'm going to basically try to familiarize myself with the standard and where everything is. If I don't use my standard, sometimes I would use the slide, right? You can use either or, but this is just you familiarizing yourself with the topic, and I try to not spend more than 45 minutes doing this, right? Because it's not in-depth studying. It's just me looking at my standard, looking at the headings, and like, oh, there are these headings, and under this heading there is this, and I'm reading the bold paragraphs, right? I'm not looking at the not bolded paragraphs. I'm just looking at the bold paragraphs. I'm looking somewhere. Oh, this is in italics. Okay, so this is an important word. What's going on here? Just basically surface level understanding as to what is going on here. This is talking about inventories. Okay. Oh, there's net realizable law of cost and net realizable value. That seems like an important concept. Oh, they're talking about LIFO, FIFO, weighted average. Just familiarizing myself with those things. Like surface level, the layout of the standard, where everything is, where the definitions, especially the headings, right? Knowing what's in the standard, unpacking it, right? That's what I'm doing. I'm unpacking the standard. And once I have done that, the second step that I would like to do is basically just go through my slides, either slide for slide, or just go through like the examples. I'm trying to now basically see how this thing gets applied, right? So now I'm going to be looking at the journals, right? So the first step is some skimming through your standard. The second step is now going through your slides and looking at examples, especially. Now, it could be slides, it could be notes and examples, depending on how they structure. Just notes, any kind of notes, especially notes that will have like the theory and they show you how to apply the theory in terms of journals, right? I'm just going through that material now. And you'll usually be using this study material hand in hand with your standard, because as you're reading and you're understanding these things, you might go back to your standard and be like, oh, okay, this is what this means. And a hot tip here that I would really, really like to share is that there are certain paragraphs when you're reading your standard, right? Don't When you're stuck on a paragraph, don't force yourself to understand the paragraph. There are certain paragraphs that you'll only understand once you've seen how they apply in an example or a question. I'm going to repeat that again. There are certain paragraphs that you will only be able to understand once you see how they've been applied. Right now, this could be in an example, it could be in a question. Just seeing how it gets applied, then you're like, ah, that's what this means. Okay, so don't force your brain to consume certain things. Like it just won't. Like
The English won't English, the math won't math. You won't get it, and it's okay.
right, pivot, maneuver, adapt. And I was like, okay, I don't get this, but maybe I'll get it later. Let me keep going. Right. So I'm looking at the standard hand in hand with examples, slide, whatever materials that I'm getting from whatever the respective university. When I was at Tux, we had notes and examples. When I was in UNISA, we had like these tutorial letters, and I'm just looking at that information together with my standard. And this is the more in-depth studying. So if I were to summarize it, right, I would say soft launch, right, skimming through your standard or attending your lectures, whatever the case might be, soft launch. Number two, understand the journals, understand how it's being applied, right? Understanding what gets debited, what gets credited. That is very imperative. I cannot accentuate or emphasize this enough. Understand what gets debited and what gets credited. And I want to be a financial accountant. I want to prepare. I just want to be involved in the preparation of financial statements. Because every time I say that, people are like, "Oh, it's so boring. Just want to process journals." But that's not the point. There's a lot of thought that goes into processing a journal. Sometimes meetings are held just trying to figure out, how do we account for this thing? what gets debited, what gets credited, what standard to apply, how to apply it, how to subsequently measure it. And I enjoy that because in my experience as a trainee auditor, I've enjoyed those debates that I've had with the clients in which we're arguing IFRS and how to account for something and how it was calculated and how I disagree with the calculation and I think you should calculate it this way. There's a lot of thought that goes into processing a journal. So now what you need to do is understand the journals, whether it's through examples, right? Study through your examples, try to do the examples yourself as well, and in your examples or your journals, they go hand in hand with the calculation, right? Because you because you have to calculate something first and then it lands up as a journal, because what you calculate is what you're going to debit and what you're going to credit. So figure that out, right? Understand the calculation in the journal through your examples especially. And the third part of me studying for financial accounting is also familiarizing myself with how it lands on the financial statements. Now, this does not have to be lost. Sometimes what I did do is I would, especially for the more complex topics such as your IFRS 9 financial instruments or share-based payments, your IFRS 2. Sometimes when I'm not understanding a certain part of the standard, I just like, okay, what would it look like in the financial statements first? In the balance sheet, how does it land and how does it touch the income statement? Now that I know, now that I see it high level that it touches this, it's gonna touch this line item here, it's gonna land in this line item here. I was like, okay, now I'm studying with the direction.
The vision is there, although I can see, I don't know how to get there, but the vision is there. I don't know what debit to credit, but I know it has to end up as an asset. I know it has to end up as an income or an expense or say a reserve or an equity. I see how it lands on the financial statements.
Sometimes I do that, right? But do your soft launch, understand the journals, plus your calculations, and understand the presentation and disclosure. And once you figured those things out, right, and try to do that as quickly as possible. Don't spend too much time trying to understand the theoretical concepts and once you figured out those things, right, like you have a good understanding of what's going on. If you have a brilliant understanding, that's good. Move to your questions as quick as you possibly can. Practice, 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 practice. I cannot emphasize this enough. I implore you, please do more questions than you spend time creating cute little notes and reading this and attending that. Practice. Because at the end of the day, when you get to the test, they're not going to ask you to prepare cute notes. They're not going to say, go attend the No, they're going to ask you a question and you're going to have to deliver. You're going to have to answer that question. So the more time that you spend answering questions, the better you become at answering questions, which is what you're going to do in the exam. Right? So do your questions, right? Sometimes just practice as often as you can. I know it's daunting, I know it's not nice, but just get to it, please. Do your questions, right? You've already read through the standard, you've already seen the examples, you know what gets debited, what gets credited, you've seen how it lands on the Fs. Do your questions, right? You will get it wrong. Sometimes you're going to need to do a question more than once, sometimes 3 times, maybe even 4 times, but just do your questions, right? As many of them as you can, to a point where it becomes a part of who you are. So those are my tips, right? Soft launch, examples, presentation and disclosure, practice. 4 steps, easy. Moving on. My favorite module, except for the costing, management, accounting, and finance. It's not that I don't like costing, actually. I actually find it a very interesting standard. I just don't think, not a standard, but an interesting topic. I was just not good at it. And I have a friend, his name is, why am I saying was? His name is Krian. He was quite brilliant when it came to costing. Like, he didn't even try hard, right? He was really good. I gravitated more towards finance, not only because I was good at it, but it's something that I do find interesting. And maybe I was good at it because I find it interesting. Because there's something interesting there. We do not know why we find the things that we find interesting, but we do. It's almost like, it's more like it pulls us to it. You don't just decide, oh, now I find this interesting. It's like, no, the thing calls you.
It was something like, you don't choose your interests, they choose you. And that's really worth thinking about too, man, because, it's really hard to get interested in something you're not interested in, even if you know there's a good reason for it. You're studying for an exam, you find the material boring, anything will be more interesting than the studying, even though you know that that's what you need to do. You can't voluntarily grab yourself by the scruff of the neck, let's say, and shake yourself and say, sit down and concentrate. Your mind will just go everywhere. But then if you're interested in something, and even if it's something you shouldn't be interested in, because that happens all the time, then it's like you're a laser focus, man. You can pay attention forever. You can work until you're exhausted. You won't even notice it, and you remember everything. It's like, okay, if you can't control your interest, what does? And man, I tell you, you can think about that for a very long time.
Right? And I found finance interesting. Your working capital management, your capital budgeting, valuations, weighted average cost of capital, you name it, I got it, I know it, I enjoyed it. So the way that I would recommend that you study for this is quite simple, right? A soft launch, although I wouldn't call it a soft launch, but if you're using the textbook, because I read the financial management textbook, you might not need to. Some people didn't. A lot of people didn't actually. But because I actually loved the topic, I just read through the textbook, right? Just sat down, read through it, and the Carrera one. That's the one that I used. But you don't have to. One thing that I would say is just go through your slides in depth because there's a lot of principles that you need to learn when it comes to management, accounting, and finance. So go through your standards, see the examples, try to understand what is the principle. So that's the first step, right? Knowing the principles. What are the principles of capital budgeting? What are the principles when it comes to weighted average cost of capital? Just understanding the basics. What are the principles, right? Study, and I got a lot of that from the slides, like the slides or the notes or whatever materials that is prescribed to me by my university. That's what I looked at, right? And I familiarized myself with those things. And step number 2 is questions. Pretty straightforward. I know there's not, hey guys, you still need to work. There's not a secret pill or a formula that I'm going to give you and you're going to automatically start passing. With Manfin, it's a lot more, the process a lot simpler, right? Because with the financial accounting, there's a lot of steps, right? Because there's legislature, there's journals, there's presentation, everything's like so rigorous. Whereas with Manfin, it's a lot more free flowing, right? So just familiarize yourself with the slides, know what everything is, know the examples, understand the principle. Just familiarize yourself with the slides, and then once you're done with all of that, knowing the principles, it's okay. When we're doing the free cash flow model to value a company, this is what we take into account, this is what we exclude, we minus the value of debt here, all of these different kind of things. You familiarize yourself with those things, and then you start doing questions and you practice them in as much depth as you possibly can. Understand why you are doing what you are doing, right? But do not limit it with financial management or manfin. Do not limit it in a sense that it's not very much. There are principles, but there are no rules. I hope you get that. There's no principle. There are no. There's a lot of principles, but there are no rules. There's not a specific way. You should do it this way. There's no other way of doing it. This is how. No, 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 no. With manfin, sometimes there's more. There's multiple ways to skin a cat. You can arrive at an answer this way. You can arrive at an answer that way. Just read the contents, understand what is going on, and then apply yourself as much as you can to the scenario on the spot on the day, right? Try to remember what you know. It's like, oh, from capital budgeting, I know that we should exclude non-cash items. Like just apply yourself, right? Read the slides, attend your lectures, and spend as much time looking at questions, right? And practice, 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 practice. It's really that straightforward when it comes to Manfin, or at least for me. I spent a lot of time. I spent more time than I should looking at textbooks, and it did not help me. So I implore you, spend more time practicing. Number 2, because another thing before I even move on, right? This is quite interesting. This is more of like a psychological tip, if I can call it that. But you remember stuff when you pull it out of your head, not when you try to put it in. And a lot of us have this idea that when I'm studying, I need to be consuming information and putting it in my brain. Your brain does not work like that. You remember stuff more. The more time that you spend pulling it out by doing questions, by redoing examples, just pulling out the information, you are more likely to remember it. So spend more time practicing. And then for auditing, this one, hey guys, I'm gonna be very honest with you, people. Take my advice or leave it. Take my advice or leave it. What worked for me, the time that I spent reading those ISAs, bruh.
I realized that this is an accident.
Guys, it did not help me. Theory did not help me in auditing, not at all. Guys, I've wasted so much time studying your ISA 610, ISA 500, ISA 315. Those things did not help me. Oh, the frustration. Guys, now let me tell you, now, this is what worked for me. This is what worked for me. Right? It might not work for you, right? If you're good in auditing or whatever, just stick to what you're doing. I'm gonna be straightforward. I'm not even gonna mince my words. I'm gonna be straightforward and tell you what I did personally. And my marks started picking up. I never struggled with auditing again. Everything was fine. Read memos. Read memos, read memos, read memos. Like read them, understand them, take notes if you want to create notes, read the memos. And then start practicing the questions without seeing the memos. So everything that you've learned, start applying and read the scenario and try to apply it. That's it. I know it's not the best advice, not the advice that lecturers would give. And I'm not saying lecturers are wrong. I am not saying that, right? Those are qualified professionals. They are a lot smarter than I am. I'm just sharing what worked for me. Everything else did not work, guys. Like the second that I just left everything, I left my ISAs, I left. Sometimes I did use my ISAs, obviously, when I'm using my Companies Act, Code of Professional Conduct, King 4. I use those ones I used a lot. And sometimes I did use ISAs, like sometimes, very rarely, but I even watched so many videos. Amanda loves to audit. I've done so much for auditing. It's it's ridiculous. But the second that I just left everything, I just looked at my memos, because sometimes, guys, sometimes I would read the theory in the ISA and then I looked at the question and I'm like, what? These things are world apart. I do not see any ISAs being applied here. Like a lot of the things that I'm see, like when I look at the memo and I'm like, I do not see where you guys are using ISA, but I do not see it. I do not see if you guys are using it. I do not get it. But yeah, because your auditing is quite straightforward, right? It's split into four, right? You have your pre-engagement, you have your planning, you have your execution, and you have your conclusion, right? Spend a lot of time just looking at the memos and looking at the question. I know with some topics in auditing, you are going to use the ISA a lot. I know in the conclusion one, I used my ISAs a lot. I can't remember which ISA specifically. I think it was ISA 700 or 701, somewhere there. There were certain parts that where the answers are already in the ISA, like they're right there. I just need to copy and paste and apply to the scenario. But for the most part, your substantive procedures, your risk of material misstatements, whatever it is, bruh, just read the memos. And once you've read the memos, go through the questions without looking at the memos and practice it as many until it becomes memory. That's what works for me. And remember to apply yourself to the scenario. You don't just write into blindly a procedure. No, 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 no. You need to read what's going on. Some procedures have already been performed. You can't write that now because you're showing them that you didn't read the question. Right. So apply yourself to the question. What industry is this company in, and then what procedures should I perform in order to audit this thing? What are the risks here at a financial statement level, at an assertion level? Right. So read your memos, do your questions. That's the advice that I would give you. Don't sue me, bro. Anyways, moving on to the last one, which is your taxation. Ah, man. I didn't like taxation, believe it or not. The modules that I loved the most was financial reporting, financial accounting, because I do want to be a financial accountant or a group financial reporter, group financial manager, financial reporting manager, whatever. That's where I lean towards financial accounting or financial analyst. I would love to be a financial analyst, right? Because I love investing. But let's not talk about me, yo. But I really find finance as a topic very interesting. So if I do not land a role, post articles into those two fields, I don't know, I'd kill myself. But here's another module, which is your taxation, right? Now, taxation, like auditing. With auditing, I never liked auditing. I was just good at it. Like I just wrote and I passed. I never failed auditing. Especially after I only struggled with auditing when I was still using my ISAs. Me, right? I'm speaking for myself here. Don't now come say, yeah. Corporate Panzola made me fail. Yeah, guys, I mean, I'm telling you what worked for me. Try it. If it doesn't work for you, that's fine. But what worked for me is just, yeah. So I never liked it. I never failed it. I just wrote and I passed with auditing. With taxation, how do I feel about tax? I find it interesting. Not interesting enough for me to have a job in it, but I found it interesting and I was very good at it because ever since I started doing tax from second year, it was always my highest mark. So I was really good at it. But I like financial accounting and financial management a lot more, corporate finance. I love those things a lot more. And I think I'm going to be very valuable. I hope so, because if I'm good in tax and I work in finance, I think those things it's a good combo. A person who knows his tax but is doing corporate, because then you can look for certain solutions that could save the company a lot of tax money. Or whenever they have a tax problem, right? There's certain things like, you don't need a tax expert. I know this thing. This is how it works. Now, the intricacies, you might need to consult with an expert, obviously, right? But for the most part, this is what you do, right? These are the deductions you're allowed to have. You claim it under this section. This is how you do your taxes for if you're going to dispose of an asset. It's CGT, capital gains tax. Like for the most part, I did quite well. I know those things, and I think that I can bring that into corporate finance or even into financial reporting when I'm a financial accountant. And I think it could be a good combo. But anyways, like I said, enough about myself. Sorry. For taxation, so this is what I recommend, right? Go through. We had very very good slides when I was still at Tugs, but go through your standards. Go through your slides. Sorry, go through your slides. Right, understand what is going on. It's quite a similar approach to financial accounting. Go through your legislature, your tax legislature, right? Slides, see examples, or go through your slides when they reference a paragraph in your legislature. Then go through your legislature immediately. But slides, legislature, and questions. 3 steps, very easy. Slides, legislature, right? Go to your legislature, highlight those paragraphs, try to understand them. And if you don't worry. Sometimes the English is too much. I know you will understand it in the questions. So slides, and when I say slides, I mean the examples or your notes and examples. Like, do the examples inside there. Like, just do everything inside those slides, right? Understand it, have a good understanding of it, right? And you do not need to do all of your slides and then do the standard. No, no, no. You can fluctuate between the two. Oh, I did the slides and we covered these parts. Now let me go look at them in the legislature. Same with financial accounting. We did this in the slides. Let me go look at it in the standard, right? So you don't need to do all of your slides and then do all of the standard and then you do the no, 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 right? You do a bit of both, right? According to what makes sense or whatever it is that you're studying. So your slides, understand your slides, look at your legislature, and then do your questions in practice. Questions, questions, questions. For all of your modules, guys, the more questions you do, the better you'll become, but you won't be able to do your questions effectively if you do not know what their theory is first. So start with the theoretical background, with the exception of auditing. With auditing, just I went straight for the application. Baba, memo even, memo, and then I did the question. But anyways, for the most part, understand your theory, just have a strong theoretical background, and then start applying it. So see how it gets applied. And those are basically my tips for studying these different modules, and I hope it helps. See you on the next one.